Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Chaf Aleph Hamad Beis 21b of Maseches Megillah, and we're starting 13 lines from the bottom of the page. The first word on the line is who, and towards the end of the line it says Amar Rava. Rava said, and we're still talking about the division of aliyahs. We said that on weekdays and Shabbos Mincha there are 3 aliyahs, and the Gemara had said that you don't have less than 10 psukim in a given set. Or for the spread out over the 3 aliyahs, you have to have at least 10 psukim, which means you're going to have, each aliyah has to have at least 3, and one of them is going to have 4. So Amar Rava says, Rishon Shekara Dalad Meshubach. If the 4 psukim go to the first person, the Rishon, then that's praiseworthy, that's good. Sheni Shekara Dalad Meshubach. If the second person, in this case the Levi, gets the 4 psukim, that's also praiseworthy, that's good too. Shlishi Shekara Dalad Meshubach. And even if the last person, the third person, gets the 4 psukim, that is also praiseworthy. All of these, in their own right, it's good to have it first, it's good to have it in the middle, and it's good to have it at the end. And the Gemara elaborates. Rishon Shekara Dalad Meshubach. If the first one gets to read the 4, that's praiseworthy, that's good. Ditnan, because we're learning a Mishnah, Bishalosh Kupos Shel Shalosh Sa'in. So there were, when people would donate their half shkalim to, everybody would have to give half shkalim, which would go into the coffers of the Beis HaMikdash, which would be used to buy the karbanos tibur, the public offerings. And it says that there were 3 kupos, basically 3 baskets or boxes that had the money. Each one was 3 sa in size, that's a measurement. Shebain tarming asalishka, with that they would donate to the lishka, to the collection in these boxes. And they kept track of what was the first box, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. On the boxes, on the baskets, it said which one they were. Leida ezo mehen nitrama rishon, so that they would know which of the baskets was donated first. So it sounds like they would put all the money that came in into the first basket, Aleph, and then any money that came after that into Beis, and then after that into Gimel, and they would keep track of which was the first basket, which was the second, which was the third. Why? In order to bring the ones that came first, shemitzvah barishon, because the way the Mishnah says it is, there's a mitzvah to do it with the first ones. Meaning there's something special, something unique about using that which was donated first. And that's why they would keep track. And similarly here, there's something special about the one who gets the first aliyah. And so if the first aliyah gets the extra pasuk, then that is great, that's praiseworthy, that makes sense. But even if the second person, which is the middle person of a set of 3, if he would get the 4 psukim, that would also be good, that would be praiseworthy. Why? Titania, because we're learning a brisa. The pasuk describes the lights of the menorah in the Mishkan, as Elmu Pnei HaMenorah Ya'iru, that towards the face of the menorah they would shine. So, what does that mean? Says the Brisa Melamed, this teaches Shemitzadet Pneim Klape Ner Ma'aravi, that they would face towards the Ner Ma'aravi, towards the western light, Ner Ma'aravi Klape Shechina, and the western light was towards the Shechina, towards Hashem's presence. So what this means, there's different understandings of how the menorah was positioned, but this is going in the opinion that the menorah in the Mishkan was positioned from north to south, going along, and to the west of the menorah was, I believe, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and one of the middle light of the menorah had 7 lights. The middle one was actually protruding towards the west, towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim, towards the Shechina, and all of the other lights shine their light towards that light. Now that was the middle one, so we see that there's a special significance of the middle one, and therefore we learn from there that if the middle person is the one who gets an extra pasuk, gets the 4 psukim, then that's also meshubach, that's praiseworthy too. Right? V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, or Rabbi Yonasan Ta'ab, Mikan Shem Tzayim Meshubach. From here you see that the middle one is special. Ve'achron shekar arba meshubach. But also if the last person reads 4 psukim, that's also praiseworthy. That's good too. Why? Mishum malan bakodesh v'lo meriding. Because we have a rule that we go up in holiness and we don't go down. So to keep to that rule, it makes sense that the last person should go up. If we have the first person read 4 and then we go down, so that's not so good. But, so that, again, there's a reason for the first person to go first, there's a reason for the second person to go, there's a reason for the first person to have 4 psukim, there's a reason for the second person to have 4 psukim, the middle person, but to have the last person is good too, because then you can fulfill this rule of going up in holiness and not going down. Rav Papa once went to the Beis Knesset, to the shul of Avi Govar, Vikaro Rishon Arba, and it was the first person who got the 4 psukim, Vishabche Rav Papa, and Rav Papa praised him. Fine, so this would also only apply where you have a Kriyas HaTorah, a laning, that only has 10 psukim, and that it's possible to divide it in different ways, and you should choose to divide it in the way that the first person should get 4, or they divide in the way that the first person gets 4, and that's praiseworthy. But what we like we said, if any of the ways really is praiseworthy in its own right. Okay, now in Pochsin mehem ve'mosif, and the Mishnah said that we don't do more and we don't do less, and actually it should have an additional quote here, which was that, or maybe replaced with the quote, that we said in the Mishnah that the first person to get the first aliyah would open with a bracha, and the last person to get the last aliyah would close with a bracha. But nobody else in between would make a bracha. And the first person wouldn't make a closing bracha. And the last, it was just, you bookended all the reading with one bracha at the beginning, one bracha at the end, and that was it. That's what the Mishnah said. Tana, we learning a brisa, haposeach mevarech lefaneh, the one who starts the reading makes a bracha before, and the one who closes the reading makes a bracha at the end. But nowadays, says the Gemara already in their time, everybody makes a bracha before and after each person who gets to read from the Torah, or each person gets an aliyah. Hainu taima, here's the reason. Didakinu rabbanan, that the rabbis enacted this. Gezerah mishum anechnasim mishum ayotzin. It's a gezerah. It's a decree. The rabbis were concerned about people who would come in late and people who would leave early. What is the concern? So Rashi says that if you come late and you miss the opening bracha of Kriyas HaTorah, so you'll think, and if each individual doesn't make their own bracha, you'll think that there's no bracha before because you didn't hear a bracha before. And if you leave early and you don't hear any brachas after any aliyahs, because you didn't stay till the end, you'll think that there's no bracha after. So therefore, the rabbis enacted that there should be a bracha before and after. That's what Rashi says. Kind of interesting that they would enact such a thing. I think it needs more further understanding. The Taz, as I saw, has a slightly different understanding. I think the Taz says that each person, even the people listening, have to be yotzei a bracha. The Kriyas HaTorah is for everybody. And so everybody has to be yotzei a bracha. So because some people might be late and miss the opening bracha, and some people might leave early and miss the end bracha, so this way we have a bracha before and after each aliyah. That way all the listeners can be yotzei, can fulfill their obligation of having a bracha made for them on the reading of the Torah. And the Taz says something at least along those lines. Okay. Now the Mishnah said, B'roshi chadash v'chol shamoed koring arba. On Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed there are 4 aliyahs, and so on. Ba'mine Ula bar Rav me Rava. Ula bar Rav asked of Rava, Parshas Rosh Chodesh ketzad koring osa. How do you read the parsha of Rosh Chodesh? So what's the issue? So the breakdown of Rosh Chodesh, actually I have a Chumash here to help us out. So on Rosh Chodesh we read from Parshas Pinchas, and it's Perek Chavches, chapter 28, the opening verses of the chapter, and we first read about the daily offering, the carbon tamid, and then we read how even the tamid is brought on Shabbos, and then we read about the additional offerings that are to be brought on Rosh Chodesh. And that's how we end up with 4 aliyahs. Now, the opening section, which talks about the daily offering, the daily tamid, has 8 verses. The section about Shabbos has just 2 verses. And the section about Rosh Chodesh has 5 verses. So, the question is going to be, actually, let me just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it has 5 verses. So the question is going to be, how should we break this down into 4 aliyahs? Again, we have a section that has 8, a section that has 2, which definitely can't stand on its own, and then a section that has 5. Now 5 can't be divided into 2, because then you're not going to have 2 3s. You need 3 psukim for every aliyah. So what's the solution here? So that's what's going to be the issue here. Says the Gemara, Ketzad Karnosa, how do we read it on Rosh Chodesh? Tzavas b'nei Yisrael v'marta aleim es karbani lachmi hadavyan tmanya psuki. The opening section, which talks about the daily offering, command the children of Israel and say to them, my offering, my bread offering, it's not bread, but my food offering, that's 8 psukim. So hechi nabit. So what should we do about these 8 psukim? Nikri trei tlasa psukin. So let's say we would have the first person read 3, and the next person read 3. So pasha u'trei, then we have 2 left over. Ve'ein mishayim b'parsha pachas mishlosh psukim. There's a new rule. Here's a new rule. You can't leave over from a given section. A parsha is a section where the Torah divides with space. You can't leave over from a given section 2 psukim. We're going to talk about that later. So you can't do 6, 6, and then... Sorry, not 6, 6. You have 8 psukim. So you might do 3, then 3, and then use the 2 and lead into the next aliyah, the next section in the Torah. But you can't do that because you can't leave over 2 from this section. So what's the other option? Nikri arba. So now let's say you take the 8 and you just divide them into 4. Rishon has 4. Sheni, the second person, reads 4. So now you have 2 more aliyahs because Rosh Chodesh is 4 aliyahs. And you have 2 and then 5 left. So 7 more psukim left. Pashalu shiva. So you have 7 psukim left. Uviyam Shabbos havyan trei. Now the section about Shabbos is 2 psukim. Uvirashi chadshechem havyan chamisha. And the section about Rosh Chodesh is 5. So you have 2 and 5. So now what are you supposed to do? You have 2 aliyahs. You have 2 and 5. Heichin avid. What should we do? Nikri trei meha v'chad mehanach. If you read the 2 from Shabbos, now you have to have 3 though, so you'll read 1 from the next section. Top of the next page, but just like you can't end a parsha with leaving over 3 psukim, you can't less than 3 psukim, you can't start a parsha only reading less than 3 psukim. So you can't read 2 from the parsha, the section about Shabbos, and then only 1 from the section about Rosh Chodesh, because you can't start a parsha, the part about Rosh Chodesh, and read only 1 pasuk. You have to read at least 3. So likri trei meha tlas mehach. Then your other option is read 2 of Shabbos. You have to get to 3, because you have to have 3 altogether. But you can't read just 1 from the Rosh Chodesh. You have to read at least 3. So you'll read 3. So you'll read the 2 of Shabbos and 3 of Rosh Chodesh. So then pashulahu trei. You only have 2 left over from Rosh Chodesh then for the last aliyah, and you have to have at least 3. So, what are you supposed to do here? This was the question that Ula asked Rava. Ula by Rav asked Rava. So, Amar Lo, so Rava said to him, Zulo Shamati. He said, I haven't heard this exact question, but Kayotzi Ba Shamati. But I heard a similar thing where we have a similar problem, and the solution will work for this too. Ditnan, we learned in a Mishnah, Bayom Arishon. So this Mishnah is talking about the ma'amados. So this is part of the process of I think these ma'amados are specific to when in Mesachas Tainis, where we talk about adding fast when it's not raining, and then there's a point where you establish ma'amados. I could be remembering wrong, but But basically the ma'amados are these groups that get together and they read the Torah. And what do they read? So it says, and I apologize that I didn't look this up before, what the exact context is, but for our purposes we can work through it. So it says, Bayom Arishon. So on the first day of the Ma'amados, Bereshis, you read the beginning of Parshas Bereshis Bar Elkim, V'hi Rakia, and you read, let there be a firmament. V'tanya Allah, and it was taught about that, Bereshis Bishnayim, Yirakia Be'echad. The beginning of Bereshis, 2 people read it, and then the Hirakia, 1 person reads. So if we go back and just see how that works, so up until Vayom Rakim Hirakia, so at the beginning of Bereshis, we have 5 psukim, and then the Hirakia, that section is 3 psukim. So now the problem is going to be, how do you have 2 people read the 5 psukim of Bereshis, of the first day of creation? So I understand how you could have the Hirakia, the second day of creation, read by 1 person, because it's 3 psukim. Ela Bereshis Bishnayim, but how could you have the first day of creation, Bereshis, read by 2 people, Chamisha Psukiyav, it's only 5 psukim. Vitanya, and we have a brayso, Hakari Batorah Leifchos Mishlosha Psukim, that when you read from the Torah, you need at least 3 verses. That's a brayso. V'itmar Allah, so it was said about that. This is Rava saying, remember he said, I didn't hear about Rosh Chodesh, but I heard something similar. So it was said about that, Rav Amar Doleg, Ushmuel Amar Poseg. Rav says, I'll tell you the solution. You know how you take 5 psukim and you get 3 psukim for each aliyah? You read 1 twice. You read the 3rd pasuk twice. That's the solution, says Rav. How you get 5, you get 6 psukim out of 5 psukim, because you read 1 twice. So Rishon reads the first 3 psukim, and Sheni reads the 3rd pasuk, 4th pasuk, and 5th pasuk. Ushmuel Amar Posek. Shmuel says, no, I have a different solution. You split a pasuk in half. The 3rd pasuk gets split in half. And apparently half a pasuk suffices to count as a pasuk. So Rav Amar Doleg, Rav said that you repeat my time Amar Posek. Why did he not say to split a pasuk in half? Kasavar, because he held that the rule is called psuka de la plaske Moshe anan lo paskinan. Any pasuk that Moshe didn't split up, we cannot come and split it up. So Rav says you can't just split a pasuk in half. If Moshe didn't put a division there, then you can't put a division there. So splitting up a pasuk is not an option. Ushmuel Amar Paskinan le, or actually it's a question I think. Shmuel Amar Paskinan le. Shmuel says we could split it. Ve'amar Rabbi Chananya Kara, but Rabbi Chananya Kara said, Tsar Gadol Hayalitz Rabbi Chanina Hagadol. I had great difficulty, great pain when I was by Rabbi Chanina Hagadol, because I was trying to teach the kids, and it was very hard to teach them entire psukim at a time. And I was begging that I should be allowed to split psukim in half to teach them. He would only allow me to split for the children. I guess in the end he did allow it. So since it's for teaching, for that purpose, I was allowed to split the psukim, but otherwise I wasn't allowed to. So asks, so there's a question on Shmuel, because you see that otherwise you're not allowed to split psukim. This was only for Rabbi Chananya Kara to be able to teach the children. They allowed it, but otherwise you can't split psukim. So how could Shmuel say it's okay? Says the Gemara, Hasam time mishum de lo efshar. What was the reason why Rabbi Chanina Hagadol allowed it for the children? Because it was impossible otherwise. There was no choice. So Hachanami lo efshar, says Shmuel, here too, there's no other choice. I guess he doesn't consider it, repeating what the Gemara will ask in a moment. Why? He doesn't consider that an option. So the only option is to split in half. What are you supposed to do? So he says this is an exception. Yes, there's a general rule you shouldn't split psukim up, but if there's no other way, says Shmuel, you could, and that's what you do to solve the problem of the ma'amados, to get Bereshis, the first 5 psukim in Bereshis, into 2 sets of 3, is you split the middle 1 in half. Asked the Gemara, Shmuel Amar Posek. Shmuel said split 1 in half. My time Amar Doleg. Why didn't he say to just repeat 1? Says the Gemara, again, we're concerned about people coming in and people leaving. We're very concerned about these latecomers and these early leavers. And for that, we go out of our way. The concern is if you would repeat a pasuk, let's say it's 5 psukim, Bereshis. So you would read the first 3, and then somebody says, "Oh, I've had enough." He leaves. In his mind, there's only 2 psukim left of this section, and he's going to think you're allowed to read just 2 psukim. Or if somebody comes in late and you read verses 3, 4, and 5, they're going to think that before you just read verses 1 and 2, and that it's okay to just read 1 and 2. So to avoid this mistake, we don't want to repeat a pasuk. That's what Shmuel holds. Okay, Meisvei. Now we ask a contradiction. We have a brisa that says, Parsha shal shisha psukim, karan osa bishnayim. If you have a parsha that's 6 psukim, 2 people read it. You split 3 and 3. V'shal chamisha psukim biyachid. But if it's only 5 psukim, then you can only have 1 person read it. Now, kara rishon shlosha. Now, what do you do though after the fact? B'diavad, if you have 5 psukim and the first person read 3 and then sat down, said a bracha afterwards. Then you only have 2 left. What are you supposed to do? So hasheni kore shnayim miparsha zu ve'echad miparsha acheres. So then the next guy, the person getting sheni, should read these 2 that are left, but he needs 3 psukim. He has to read 1 from the next section. V'yesh omrim shlosha. But some say no. Once you go into the next section, like we said before, it's from here, that you can't just read 1, you have to read 3. When you start a new section, you have to read at least 3 psukim. Now originally though, the brisa said that if you have only 5 psukim, 1 person should read it. And it's only if he read 3 instead, then we have to figure out what to do after that. But lichatchila, we're saying, only 1 person should read all 5. V'misa, now if Rav and Shmuel were correct that it's an option to either repeat a pasuk or to split a pasuk in half, so l'man damar doeg nidlog, l'man damar posek nifsok. According to the one that says repeat, we should repeat. Why are we insistent that if there's 5 psukim, only 1 person can read it? Really, have 2 people. 2 people could just either repeat, or according to Shmuel, split the middle pasuk in half. Says the Gemara, Shani Hasam de Efshar B'ach. There it's different because it's possible to do it this way, to read into the next section. Because what are we talking about there? There we're talking about it's a regular weekday, where you're reading the weekly parsha. So you read the weekly parsha, and let's say we're up to Shlishi, and it's only, well, you have to figure out the exact scenario, but I guess, right, whatever, it could be the Rishon was supposed to read 5, and then the next 2 were only supposed to read 3. So what happens? Rishon read 3. So now Sheni can't just read 2. He's got to read into the next section. He reads into the next section, he's got to read at least 3, and that's going to mess everything up, and we're going to need to read extra psukim to catch up, to get everybody 3 psukim. But on a regular weekday, you're just reading more of the weekly parsha. That's no big deal. That's okay. That's what it's talking about when it says you should read into the next section. But Rav and Shmuel are talking about where you're specifically supposed to read from Bereshis, and it's specific to the days. I think it's because on the Monday of the Ma'amados you want to read, on the Sunday of the Ma'amados you want to read from the first day of creation, and maybe you could read. It sounds like you could read from the second day, but to start reading from the third day, that would be a problem. And certainly by Rosh Chodesh, this would not help us to just say read into the next section, because the next section is nothing to do with Rosh Chodesh anymore. So that's not an option. So that's what says Rav and Shmuel. When it's an option to keep reading, then yes, you should just read more psukim so you have enough. But if it's not an option, that's where Rav says read a pasuk twice, and Shmuel says split a pasuk in half. Amri Tanchum, Amri Shum ben Lakish, or Bishua ben Levi, actually, maybe. So Tanchum said in the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Halacha ki yesh omrim. The halacha is like the opinion that said that when you are starting the new section, you have to read at least 3 psukim. Because the Bryce actually originally said that if you end up where you have 5 psukim and the first person reads 3, and then now the next person is stuck with 2, they have to go into the next section. First opinion said to just read 1 from the next section. And the Yesh Omrim said, the second opinion said, no, it has to be at least 3. Says the Gemara, the halacha is like that opinion that it has to be at least 3. V'amar Rabbi Tancham amar Rabbi Shlomo ben Levi. And he said further, Kishem she'en maschilin b'parsha pachos migim psukim. Just like you can't start a parsha by reading less than 3 psukim, like we just said, kach en meshayrin b'parsha pachos mishalosh psukim. So too, when you come to the end of a section, you can't leave over in the parsha less than 3 psukim left. That's a rule that we said before. This is the source for it. That at the end of a parsha, you also can't leave over less than 3 psukim. Ask the Gemara, Pshita. That's obvious. Why? Because now think about it. Umas chalta dikam mekel tanakama. Machmiri yesh omrim. If when it comes to starting a new section, the Tanakama, the opening opinion said, the first opinion said, that we could be lenient and just read 1 of the new section. But the Yesh Omrim, the other opinion said, no, you have to read at least 3. So shiur, when it comes to leaving over, demachmir Tanakama, where the Tanakama was stringent, meaning because the first opinion said, originally, ideally, if you have 5 psukim, you should read all 5. Now, why does he say that? Why not read 3 and leave over 2 and then read 2 and 1 or 2 and 3, whatever you hold? He said, no, you have to read 5. He held you can't leave over less than 3. Can't leave over 2. Sorry, he said when there's 5, right, you have to leave all 5. You can't just read 3 because you can't leave over less than 3. You can't leave over 2. So the Tanakama agreed to that. The Tanakama, who was lenient about starting a new section and said when you start a new section you can read 1, but he was stringent when it comes to ending a section and said you can't leave over less than 3. You can't leave over 2. So lo kol shekain demachmiri yesh omrim. Isn't it all the more so that the Yesh Omrim, the one who was stringent about starting a new section and insisting on 3, of course they will also be stringent about ending a section that you have to leave over at least 3. And if that's a kol shekain, if that's obvious, then why did it have to be stated? Why did Rabbi Tancham have to say in the name of Rabbi Shlomo ben Levi that you can't leave over less than that just like you can't start a new section and with 3 psukim, with less than 3 psukim, you also can't end a section leaving over less than 3 psukim. That's obvious. Of course you would hold that. So says the Gemara, it's not so obvious. Ma'u detema, what might I have said? Nichnasin shchichi, yotzin lo shchichi. I might have said that it's very common that people come in late, but that people leave early? That's not so common. Demanchi sefer Torah v'nafki, that they would just leave the Torah out there and leave early when the Torah is already being read? That's not so common, and I don't have to be concerned for that. That's what I might have thought to say, and therefore, I only have to worry about people coming late. What's the concern that people come late? So if I were to start a section and only read 1 pasuk, then again, this opinion insists that when you start a section, you have to read at least 3 psukim. You have to read at least 3 psukim. And 1 second. One second. Right, so the concern is that if you start a section and you read less than 3 psukim, then somebody who comes late is going to think that person they're going to come in and they're going to, let's say they're about to start a new aliyah and they're 1 pasuk into they're starting from the 2nd pasuk of a section. what are they going to think about the person who just read? They're going to think they only read one pasuk, when really that's not true. They really read 3 psukim because they read from the previous section. But they're not going to realize that. So the concern is that if somebody comes late, they're going to think that if you read just one pasuk from this section, and they come in and you're up to pasuk number 2, they're going to think the previous person only read one pasuk. But that's not what happened. What really happened was they were carrying you over from the previous section, and they really read 3. So that we're concerned about. We're concerned that people will come late. But to be concerned that people will leave early, and therefore to say don't leave over psukim, because again, the concern if you leave over less than 3 psukim at the end of a section, somebody might think that, there's only 2 psukim left of this section, the next guy who's going to get early is just going to read 2 psukim. So therefore we don't want to leave over just 2 psukim. But maybe you would think we don't have to be concerned about that, because who's going to leave early when the Sefer Torah is open? Kamash Malan comes Rabbi Tanchum in the name of Rishon Levi to say, no, even we're also concerned about that, and therefore everybody agrees that you cannot leave over less than 3 psukim in a section. Now, what about the other opinion? Tanakama Maishna Shiuri Delo Mishum Yotzin. Now, what about the Tanakama? Because the Tanakama was not concerned about people leaving early. The Tanakama held that you're allowed to... Sorry, he was not concerned about people coming late. The Tanakama said that you're allowed to have 1 pasuk of a section. He wasn't concerned about people of a new section. He said you can have 1 pasuk from a new section. He wasn't concerned about people coming late. Right? Again, the concern, if you only read 1 pasuk, is that somebody will come in, and they're at the 2nd pasuk of the section, and they're going to think that the last guy just read 1 pasuk. But the Tanakama wasn't saying it's okay to read 1 pasuk, because he wasn't concerned about that. So why is he not concerned about that? Maishna Shiuri Delo, he's not worried about leaving over Mishum Yotzin. It's asking it the other way though. Why is he only concerned about people leaving early? That he is concerned about, because he said he can't leave over less than 3 psukim, which is a concern that people might leave early with just 2 psukim left, and they're going to think that you're just going to read 2 psukim. They don't realize you're going to read more after that. So therefore you have to leave over at least 3 psukim. That the Tanakama, the first opinion, was concerned about. Mishum Yotzin, people leaving early. Aspui Nami, he should also say you can't read just 1 pasuk into the new section because of people coming late. Says the Gemara, Amri, they'll say, Manda Ayel, Shiuli Shayel. No, we're not worried about people who come late because they're going to ask, what happened? How come we're just on the 2nd pasuk? Did the person right before just only read 1 pasuk? Because they're there to ask the question. And people will tell them, no, they read from the previous one, they read 3 psukim, don't worry about it. So somebody who's coming in and he's going to be there, so he could clarify, we're not concerned about somebody who came late. But somebody who's leaving early, he's going to leave, he's going to have all his assumptions in his mind, and he's nobody to talk to about it. He's just going to leave with his assumptions that the Tanakama was concerned about. Okay, Shalach by Rabba Brei de Rabba Rav Yosef. So Rabba, the son of Rabba, sent a message to Rav Yosef, Hilchasa Mai. So what, in fact, is the halacha when it comes to the Ma'amados? Who do we pass? Like Rav and Shmuel, and that's going to inform us also about how to read the Torah on Rosh Chodesh. So Shalachei Hilchasa Doleg. The halacha is we read a pasuk twice. Ve'emtzai Dolgang. It's the second person who reads the pasuk twice, the second time. So in the Ma'amados we would read the first 3 psukim of Bereshis, and then the second person would repeat the 3rd pasuk and read 3, 4, 5. And similarly on Rosh Chodesh we have a similar thing where the first person getting the Aliyah reads, the first Aliyah is 3 psukim, and then the second Aliyah repeats the 3rd pasuk and reads 3. And so only 5 psukim have been read at that point in time. And so there's still, you've gotten 2 aliyahs down, and only 5 psukim have been read, which means you have 3 left of the first section, which is what we need. You need to leave over at least 3, and 2 of the V'yom HaShabbos section, and the third person will read those two together, which is 5 psukim altogether. And then the fourth section, that was the third person, and the fourth aliyah reads the section about Rosh Chodesh, which is 5 psukim itself, and everything works out that way. Okay, we'll pick up from here next time.